Joining us now for more on this is the former Director of Central Intelligence and a former ambassador to the negotiation on the conventional armed forces in Europe, James Woolsey. Ambassador, great to see you.
Good to be with you.
All right. What do you see as the best possible outcome here from this second summit with Kim Jong Un?
I think if things don't get worse, you've done reasonably well this time around. The problem is that the North Koreans have considerably more leverage than any of us wish they did. First of all, they have nuclear weapons. Secondly, they've orbited satellites. That means that they could put a simple nuclear weapon, just an enhanced radiation, enriched radiation weapon, like the one we dropped on Hiroshima, and use that to generate from a satellite in orbit a detonation creating electromagnetic pulse and knocking out the electric power grids that are beneath it. And you may not know where that comes from. The North Koreans talk about this, too, and they threaten about it, sometimes in rather vague language, sometimes rather specifically. So we don't just have deterrence, mutual assured deterrence. They would know where an attack against them came from. We would know where one came from if it hit us. Not so. It may be, if it comes against us, if the lights go out, it may be Russia, it may be China, it may be the sun with a geomagnetic event, it may be North Korea, and in a few months or a year or two, it may be Iran. So,
is there any, Ambassador, is there any incentive
in using this for deterrence?
Is there any incentive for Kim to give up his nuclear weapons?
I think there's very little. He would like prosperity and his dictatorship, but he, above all, does not want to give up being a dictator. And we've seen that with his father and his grandfather, and the list of negotiations goes back a ways. In each one, the North Koreans have made promises that they reneged on, didn't fulfill. I always say you can tell that the North Korean negotiators are lying because their lips are moving. They've never not had a scam in the works against us in order to get food, money, relief from sanctions, whatever. And then they play around those or get away from them or ignore them, and it starts all over again.
Now, there's another threat looming that North Korea will need to commit more to doing, and just other than denuclearization. The Guardian is now reporting that leading cybersecurity experts say that North Korea poses a bigger threat for the U.S. when it comes to cyber attacks than Russia does. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the problem with cyber is that you can do it with just a handful of people, if it's really good, maybe one, and attack systems such as the command and control systems for the natural gas grid or the electric grid. And you don't need a lot of people. You don't need a lot of money to invest. You can do it with a extremely well-trained and smart team of hackers. And part of the problem is that several places, including North Korea, unfortunately, have that and have created it. Certainly China has. Certainly Russia has. That's one part of the problem. The other is that we have not responded in kind. We have, except in a couple of important cases. But generally speaking, we have been like a coach, let's say a hockey coach, and he's got a team full of Wayne Gretzky's, the best there is. And he turns to them and he says, all right, guys, here we go. We're about to take to the ice. I want you to know everybody's going to play goalie. That's what we've done, essentially. We've created a situation where we're defending this and blocking that and trying to make sure they don't do this to us and don't do that to us. But very rarely have we gone on the offense with cyber and taken out some of the things that we could take out but don't talk about.
And why is that?
I don't know. It's more than one administration has had this let's all play goalie mentality. Some don't. There are parts of the U.S. government and parts of the American hacker world which are very good at this and could play a much more real Wayne Gretzky type game.
Is it because, you look back at the Stuxnet incident with Israel and Iran, there was some concern that can then be turned around and used against us. Once you deploy one of these cyber attacks, it's very easy for hackers to get the code and then reverse it. Is that what you're hearing as well?
Sometimes they might be able to. It depends on how careful and how good one is and how one masks things. It's not a sure bet that any time you use something, it's going to be taken and used against you. But the key thing is that we're not nearly as much in the game as we could be. And if you're always worried that they're going to take what you do, like the business with Israel, they take what we do with an ally like Israel and find out about it, then they're going to come at us, and so we shouldn't ever get it started. That means we only play goalie, and you don't want to do that.
Yeah, you can't score. It's hard. It's not impossible. There are goalies in hockey that score goals, but it's very difficult to do so. Let's turn our attention to Venezuela. Right now, millions of Venezuelans are suffering from a lack of basic food supplies, medicine, and other deep political uncertainty, spiraling economic problems as well. Massive, rampant inflation there. Yesterday, Vice President Mike Pence announced additional sanctions on the country, adding more pressure on President Nicolas Maduro to step down. Pence also said that the U.S. stands with opposition leader Juan Guaido. Ambassador, will this added pressure do anything to actually force Maduro to step down?
I think he, like Kim Jong Un, cares more about staying in power than anything and is absolutely obsessed by it and will only work to that end and will not back down in the face of economic pressure that just makes more and more of his population starving. He doesn't care. And I think that we've got to do something more decisive than what we're doing. Secretary of State Kerry, back several years ago, said that we no longer had the Monroe Doctrine, so we were not going to take action to keep countries out of establishing colonies, essentially, in the in the Western Hemisphere. We are seeing now, for example, a Russian base to base perhaps a couple or even later more of its strategic bombers in the Caribbean. We didn't used to see Russia building airstrips in the Caribbean. That sort of thing. And tied in with Maduro's dominance and his kowtowing to Cuba and to Russia is a serious problem for us, and it's going to get more serious. I think we're going to have to take some kind of action here in which, working with the real president, the new one, that we ought to establish essentially a communist-free zone in a portion of the border of Venezuela, and begin to have some of our own special forces and Navy SEALs and Army Rangers and so forth go in and help the people who are getting shot and killed because they're hungry by Maduro.
We saw a few defectors.
We're going to have to show some spine. Say?
Yeah, we saw a few defectors yesterday from the military, but still most of the military still seems to back Maduro. I want to also take a closer look at something happened to Univision anchor Jorge Ramos yesterday. He says the Venezuelan government detained him and his crew after an interview with Maduro in Caracas. Ramos said that he showed Maduro a video of children eating garbage out of a truck. Maduro got very angry and then got up and left the interview. Ramos says that he told Maduro, quote, "That's what dictators do, not Democrats," and at which point Maduro's minister told him that the interview was over. Here's Ramos giving that explanation.
They confiscated all the cameras, they confiscated the videos, they confiscated the interview, they took away our cell phones. I don't have a cell phone. And they stole my work. My job is to ask questions, and he stole our jobs. And he thinks that he can censor international press the same way he censors people in Venezuela, but he cannot do that. We won't be silent This is an abuse. This goes against our right to ask questions. This goes against all journalists, and we don't have anything right now.
This is the behavior of a desperate man. A brave, Jorge Ramos gets a lot of flack from Republicans because he's very pro-immigration. He's taken on President Trump pretty hard. But this is a very brave thing for him to do. But this type of response by a guy like Maduro, this is a desperate sign from a desperate man, is it not?
Well, I hope so. I'd like to see things just collapse for him, but I'm afraid we're going to have to give it a push. And we've got a lot of countries in the world on our side. We've got almost all of the democracies, for 45-50% of the countries in the world. There are a few like Mexico that are abstaining. But whereas back in the 80s, if you look at Latin America, much of it would have been dictatorships hostile to us and hostile to their own people. Now, most of these prospering, largely Latin American countries are largely, not entirely, but largely free. And they're supporting the real Venezuelan government, not Maduro.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we don't pay enough attention to what happens down in South America, and we're paying the price for it right now. It's a crucial issue, so that we need to pay close attention. Ambassador James Woolsey, great to see you. Thanks for your insight on North Korea and on Venezuela as well.
Thanks. Good to be with you.
All right, when we come back, the latest on the House vote to block President Trump's emergency declaration. Stay with us. You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel. Newsmax TV is now available for free on your smartphone. Just go to your iPhone or Android store and download the free Newsmax TV app. Then you can watch free TV news with an American spin anytime, anywhere in the world. Newsmax TV, real news for real people.